Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Think globally and act locally. The momentous growth the Green Party has seen in Canada supersedes our borders, and the Green Party truly is a global party. Working in cities, provinces, states, and countries around the world towards a common vision. A vision for a world where citizens, communities, businesses, and the environment thrive in healthy and prosperous balance with each other. Green parties around the world are electing representatives, and these people are implementing and influencing changes that are putting European nations, for example, leaps and bounds ahead of Canada and the US, creating thousands of green-collar jobs in sustainable industries, clean energy, alternative transportation to meet Kyoto commitments, transitions to organic agriculture to keep harmful chemicals out of our environment and out of our human bodies. These policies are not only making Europe a champion for the environment and human health, but through conservation of resources and saving taxpayers money, they are not only increasing sustainability at a local level, but they're also increasing their global competitiveness. Canada and the US must follow this example. And we are. Green Party members in the United States and in Canada are being elected in municipal and regional governments, and they are making these changes. Our next speaker is a perfect example of this. Mike Feinstein has been acting as a green activist locally and globally since 1988. Between 1996 and 2004, he served as a member of the City Council for the City of Santa Monica, and between 2000 and 2002, he was the mayor for the City of Santa Monica, and we have a short clip here to play for you.
With the raising of right hands, the newly elected and re-elected members of the City Council, Board of Education, College Board of Trustees, and Rent Control Board were all sworn in at City Hall. The City Council unanimously chose Councilman Michael Feinstein of the Green Party to serve as mayor for the next 2 years. Councilman Richard Bloom, Evan McHugh.
Wouldn't that be great to start seeing some green mayors in Canada? Woo! Mike has also served on a really wide variety of regional, state, national, and international Green Party and government boards and commissions. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Michael Feinstein. Thank you.
Bonjour, mes amis les Verts, nous sommes ici encore.
My friends, my green friends, alors je vous...
And greetings from south of the border. And for people like me, south of the border means tropical beaches and stolen presidential elections. For you, south of the border means temperate beaches and stolen presidential elections. And why do I start with that? The United States is in a situation where, indeed, we've had 2 stolen presidential elections in 2000 and 2004. And the significance of that can't be overstated because, indeed, we have the worst presidency potentially in the history of the United States and the world. And instead of dealing with the stolen elections, looking at both what went wrong to simply have the votes counted properly and what's wrong with our voting system, we have a Democratic Party which puts its head in the sand and wants to blame the Green Party and the voters who vote Green, who choose freely to vote Green, for George Bush instead of looking at themselves. And that's very, very significant. So what I want to do is just touch a bit on what we're up against, how we're trying to deal with it, and why it's also relevant for you. We share the same faulty voting system as you do, the first past the post, or as we call it, winner-take-all voting system, where in single-member districts, only some voters get representation, and all those who didn't vote for the person with the majority or the plurality of votes get no representation whatsoever. In addition, our system is funded by large corporations. And the Democratic Party made a choice in the 1980s to join the Republican Party and go after corporate donations and abandon their traditional base. And one of the reasons why there's increasing space for a Green Party is because, indeed, they've chosen to go that route. In addition, we have a corporate-owned media that chooses who gets on and who doesn't get on, and that squeezes out more and more choice for voters. In addition, simply getting on the ballot in the United States is getting more and more difficult as laws written by Democrats and Republicans and as conservative judges which interpret those laws who have been appointed by conservative Democrat and Republican governors and presidents over the last 20 years make it more and more difficult. And one of the most vicious examples recently is in the state of Pennsylvania, where the Green governor and lieutenant governor candidates submitted overwhelmingly more than enough signatures to qualify for the ballot under a new interpretation of the law there in Pennsylvania. The Democrats are challenging our candidates' signatures, and we have to pay attorneys about $7,000 to $8,000 a week for a full month in order to defend every signature. Rather than it being the government's place to simply validate the signatures, we would have to defend them. And as a result, currently we have lost our candidate for governor and lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania because they don't have the money simply to defend the citizens' right who have signed petitions to be on the ballot. So it's a systemic attack against us. And when people say there are two right wings to one corporate party in the United States, that's what they're talking about. And we have some social issues that are used to make people think that we have choice, just like we have choices of 7 toothpastes, but we don't get to debate fair trade versus free trade, those sort of issues in the United States. We're under a fundamental attack. So when it comes to questions like Iraq, you only have Democrats putting their fingers to the wind several years later to see if there's any public opinion to try and give them some space. And everybody but Congresswoman Barbara Lee from the Oakland area voted for the Patriot Act, barely without reading it, which just steals our civil liberties. So under that kind of situation, how does a party like ours break through? Well, one, on the Iraq War, the message this year is if you want to vote for peace, you vote Green. We have a candidate running for U.S. House of Representatives in the state of Delaware named Michael Berg. Some of you may recall his son, Nicholas Berg, was beheaded on the internet in Iraq. Michael chose to run for Congress as a Green because of that, because he believed the United States policy was wrong. And the day after al-Zakari was killed by the United States, CNN went to his house and woke him up and shook him out of bed early in the morning and said, "Are you happy now?" And he said, "No, I'm not happy, because as Greens, we believe in nonviolence and nobody's death makes us happy." And when the opposition to us says, "Oh, you can't pull out now," in this cut-and-run BS way that they try and characterize it, because Iraq will somehow decompose, the arrogance of the ruling, elite, unelected regime in the United States, that we think that we can tell the cradle of civilization how to resolve their own situation, that kind of arrogance is what marks the foreign policy. And when John Kerry got up in 2004 and said, "I could fight that war better," and when Hillary, who was a presumptive nominee in 2008, is saying, "I would do it better," that's the kind of nonsense, and that's why they don't want us in the debate. So certainly on the congressional level, we're going out and saying we're the party for peace, and we're the party to get out of Iraq now. Now, in addition to that, because we're in this horrible first-past-the-post system, and our legislative districts are enormous. A U.S. congressional district, it's about 450,000 people, maybe a little bit more voters per district, and even in my state, our state assembly districts are about 400 and some thousand voters as well. It makes it very difficult to win in those situations. So we have really focused on running in municipal races. In 1996, we had about 45 Greens holding elected office after the November presidential election. In 2000, we grew up to about 90. Today, we have over 220 Greens holding office on city councils, school boards, and all sorts of other municipal office. Obviously, on a municipal level, where big money isn't as important, where community reputation is more important, your record as an activist, having served in your community, where you can go door to door and talk to people, it gives us a better chance at getting elected. So we've gone that route. There's more space in our electoral system to do that. And what's happening now is not only are more and more Greens getting elected, but Greens are continuing to get reelected. What that's telling us is that voters believe that not only do we have good ideas, but that we can govern. And when we make the arguments about why we should be in the United States Congress, the California State Assembly, or the Canadian House of Commons, in addition to saying we have these great ideas on the federal level, if Greens have run in local levels and they have done well in office, if they've worked with all members of other parties, and they've passed legislation, and if voters have returned them to office, then we can say, look, we can govern. We've shown we belong on the local level. What's wrong with the system that we aren't on the higher levels? So that gives us an important tool. And for your work here in Canada, the more that you look at doing that sort of thing, the better off I think that you're going to be, and that there's a lot we can learn from you. I think that's one thing that you could also gain from our experience. Now, so far, in addition to those 220 people that we currently have in office, we have had 32 different Greens who have been mayors, myself and 31 other people across the United States. That's an incredible thing. In my situation, we choose the mayor from inside the city council. Council members get elected first, and then they vote. I was a 7-0 vote. There was one other Green on the council with me and 5 Democrats, and they actually all voted, 3 relatively progressive Democrats and 2 conservative. They all ended up voting. In part, our consensus-oriented process teaches us how to find common ground with each other. It doesn't just say, might makes right, I'm going to get my idea through, but it understands that there is a wisdom inherent in our diversity as a species, and everybody has something of value. And our process is dedicated to drawing that out first. And one of the reasons I ended up being chosen mayor was because that sort of way of carrying myself in our meetings was understood and appreciated by my colleagues. So the fact that we have 32 mayors is very, very significant across our country. One of the other things that is significant is thus far we've had 15 different Greens who are 25 years or younger who've been elected to municipal office, and another 15 between 26 years old and 30. And I have to say that last night, for all of you who were at the dinner, who heard the inspirational speech from Giselle Bacher and all of the youth caucus that you have there, that there is amazing youth energy in your own party. And I think that you're also going to experience, as you run young people, that they're going to get elected locally. Because people who are under 30 haven't made the same long-term political alliances as people who have been voting for an existing establishment party for decades. So our percentages are much higher. People are more idealistic, they're more open, they haven't been beaten down, and they're more open to voting Green. So running young Greens, and of course running women to show that we get it, those sort of things are going to increase our performance. We've had Greens in office both in traditionally liberal areas like myself, Santa Monica, Madison, Wisconsin, Berkeley, New Haven, Connecticut, etc. But we've also elected people in a lot of conservative areas. David Conley has been elected in Lake Superior, Wisconsin, which is right across from Duluth, right at the southwestern end of Lake Superior. He's been in office as a county supervisor for 22 years. Art Goodtimes in western Colorado has been a county supervisor since 1998. And these are relatively conservative areas. Why are we getting elected not just in progressive areas but in more conservative areas? Quality of life isn't on the left-right spectrum, number one. And number two, a lot of issues about quality of life really have to do with growth and development and how we relate to our planet. And one of the things that we find with Greens is that it is our agenda that says sprawling development doesn't work, that promoting economic approaches that destroy community-based business doesn't work. And as a result, we're getting elected in places because people across political spectrums, as the quality of life goes down, realize that Democrats and Republicans who are just saying more growth, it brings us more tax income, we're not really worried about where it's distributed because it's getting more money and the contributions come to us from the people who have the money. We're the ones who are going out and we're saying, you know what, it's got to be different. And for, you know, one of the things you have to think about, again, as you're appealing across the board, in our country, when we deal with Republicans, there's a Main Street versus Wall Street split. And small-town values of having community voice is something that is held by a lot of people who we might call conservative, but that's really a green value, bottom-up grassroots democracy. So what are the things that tend to mark local green office holders? In my mind, one, it is our approach to development. So when we're looking at, and the growth is happening on this planet, when we're looking at growth, we're saying that we want to have cities that are vibrant in their centers, that don't promote sprawl, that have mixed-use development, that have on-site affordable housing so people can live close to where they work, so there's a job housing balance, so you can ride your bike, you can walk, you can go on rollerblades, like I go around, that sort of thing, public transportation. And we're fundamentalists about that. If we're fundamentalists about anything, every time there's a plan, we're saying, not just is there enough housing, but is it affordable to all classes of society to ensure that we have that sort of balance? Number two, social justice. Every community, there's a social justice issue. In my community, it was dealing with the civil liberties of the homeless. It was pushing living wage. But one of the other great examples that we had in terms of social justice, in New Paltz, New York, the village of New Paltz, we had a city council majority for a few years. And Jason West, 26-year-old mayor, got elected there in New Paltz. One of the things that he did when he was approached by residents who said, I want to have the same rights as other people, is he started issuing certificates for gay marriage, the first mayor in the United States to approve gay marriage. It's in the Green Party platform. It's not in the parties of the other countries. So all around, we have land use, we have social justice, and then we look at empowerment. Because, again, we understand that the wisdom in communities and having people help decide their path and their culture is what makes the best government. So we push for electoral reform. In San Francisco, and by the way, in terms of large cities, we've had Greens in office on the City Council / Board of Supervisors in San Francisco since 2000, in Milwaukee, in Boston, Chuck Turner in a inner city African American district. There we've had people in office that way, so we've had people elected in these large districts. And Matt Gonzalez, who was one generation removed from rural northern Mexico, immigrants who came to Texas and then moved on to California. What Matt did when he got elected is they have single-seat districts in San Francisco, and he said, well, how do we improve the process there? And he submitted a plan to the city with grassroots green energy. We got it on the ballot for a public vote, and that was to put in a system that we know by different terms that we're now calling ranked choice voting, where voters get a chance to rank all the people on the ballot, and that returns the powers to the voters and not putting it in the hands of the political parties and the politicians. So that went on the ballot now, and now that is in place. And now we call it instant runoff voting in San Francisco. Now it's in San Francisco, and it is an example for the rest of the country. Burlington, Vermont just voted it in. Minneapolis is going to be voting it in, hopefully in November, put on the ballot by Cam Gordon, a Green City Council member there. So in each case, these kind of fundamental characteristics may vary community by community, but essentially those are the kind of things that put us together. We also do have a Green elected on the state legislative level. John Eder in Portland, Maine, is a member of the state house. He was elected in 2002, and again, this shows you a little bit about what we're up against. After John was elected, what did the Democrats do? Did they say, you know what, here's a person who's very progressive, and maybe we can play good cop, bad cop. He can bring in universal health care, other ideas that maybe we're a little afraid to do, but we might take advantage of, like the Social Democrats have done in coalition governments with Green parties in many countries around the world. No. They redistricted John Eder out of his district so that if he was going to run again in 2004, he would now have to either run against an incumbent Democrat in his own district or who knows what. Well, he outsmarted them and moved about 4 blocks away and moved down the street. And because the voters were so disgusted at the obvious manipulation by the Democrats, he ended up getting reelected with about 65% of the vote. But it's not all happy. I do have to say, in Minneapolis, we won 2 city council seats out of 13 in 2001. And this has been a Democratic town for years. I grew up in that area. Natalie Johnson Lee, who was one of the first African Americans on that council, and Dean Zimmerman. The Democrats there also redistricted and forced both of them into re-elections against incumbents, and it ended up that Natalie had to run against the subsequent other African American on the council. And we sued and lost in court against a very, very inappropriate redistricting, and both of them got taken out. Fortunately, Cam Gordon got elected, and we replaced one of those seats with a different one. But again, it's a very, very troubling and vicious situation, and part of that is why I think it's so important about your successes up here, because we do need to see some other examples that a Green Party can be successful because of the level of attack we're under. Your election of Elizabeth this weekend, I don't know how many of you know this, but Elizabeth is going to have a full-page feature on her in the New York Times this weekend. That is only going to help us. That is only going to help us immensely. And I think that the increased cooperation between Greens in our countries across borders, on cross-border issues, and understanding each other has to continue more and more. And I hope that with each national meeting and even our provincial and state meetings, we send people back and forth. 2 things I just want to close with. I want to thank Jim Harris for working hard to get me here. He recruited me. August in Santa Monica is the time of year I wait for. The water's the warmest. I can swim every day and flop around like a little kid in the ocean. And he got me out of Santa Monica to come here, and I don't regret a second of it. So I just want to really thank him, number 1. Number 2, a little bit of history that you don't know. Starting in 1999, your own Steve Kisby started coming to U.S. Green meetings, and on his own, not invited, and brought a real class and dignity to our meetings. He was so cool that we actually asked him to facilitate a lot of our harder discussions. And it was Steve's leadership that helped start the first Canamex process, which brought the Green parties of Mexico, Canada, and the United States together to talk about our opposition to NAFTA in 1991. And he's just a class act. He's well respected in the United States, and I don't think because he's so humble, you know what a good job he's done with us. And he's a major player on the global green scene, and I just think he needs an ovation. Finally, I want to close with two points. One, the Green Party of the United States is the only political party in the United States that has called for the impeachment of George Bush and Dick Cheney. Why? Warrantless searches in violation of the United States Constitution, destroying our civil liberties, authorizing torture around the world, indefinite detention of people without charge, a war of aggression violating international law in Iraq, use of illegal weapons like depleted uranium on civilians, deliberate deception both about the situation in Iraq, and it is clear that there are many unanswered questions about the events of 9/11. Violation of international treaties, pulling us out of the ABM Treaty and the Geneva Convention and what's going on in Guantanamo, and treason by outing a CIA agent whose husband had the temerity to question what was going on with Bush and the lies going into Iraq. To close, I just want to say one more thing. People attack Greens in the United States because we ran Ralph Nader for president in 1996 and 2000 to put out ideas for the people in our country to consider. Green ideas, as we talked about yesterday, there are Green parties in over 90 countries because this is a common cross-cultural response of our species to the unsustainability of our lifestyle. And when people tell you, Canadian Greens, that you shouldn't be running for office because you are stealing votes from other parties, it is the arrogance of political parties and politicians that think that the votes belong to them that is behind this whole spoiler nonsense. Votes belong to the people who vote, and they have the freedom to make up their own mind. Having spent this weekend with you, I am confident that as more and more Canadians are given the chance to vote Green, they will make up their mind that way. They will vote Green, and we will have a Green Canada. Thanks for having me with you. God bless you all.